Today is the anniversary of my traumatic brain injury. And so for today's episode, I wanted to share some of my story and lessons learned over, I can't believe today is 17 years of living with brain injury. Now, it's 17 years since my first TBI, but my most recent serious brain injury was 5 years ago in December 2019. And then I've had COVID twice since then, most recently this year, June 2024, which has caused long COVID and neurological symptoms. So, I've had over 10 concussions since the first brain injury. So when people ask me about my TBI, I don't always know what to say or how to address it because it wasn't just one injury. For me, it's really been a cumulative journey. So today I wanted to share some of my own story, which I don't often do here on this podcast, but as a way to celebrate and work through my own anniversary feelings, I decided to record this for you guys today. So yeah, here it is. There is always hope, and you are not alone.
Hi, I'm Cristabelle Braden, and this is my brain injury podcast, Hope Survives. Here we share information, education, and support for the brain injury community. This is an uplifting podcast to bring hope to your darkest days. As a survivor of traumatic brain injury and multiple concussions, I know what it's like to struggle to find hope. I don't want anyone to feel as alone as I did, and that's why I started my online community called Hope After Head Injury. This podcast is an extension of that, and I'd love to invite you to join along as we explore the realities of life with brain injury, with messages of encouragement, interviews with doctors and professionals, and survivor stories. No matter where you're at on your journey, there is always hope.
With a little hope, you can make it through today. With a little faith, someday you'll get through the pain. Just a little love is enough to light the way through your darkest night. Hope survives. Hope survives.
Welcome back to Hope Survives podcast. As always, thank you so much for being here, for listening, and being a part of our brain injury community. I don't know where you're at on your journey. Maybe you just had your brain injury and you are in the first couple months of trying to figure it out and you came across this episode. Maybe you've had it for 1 year or 2 years and you've just kind of started dealing with the chronicness of it. For some people, symptoms persist longer. For some people, when they first get injured, they're able to get the right treatments and recover and improve within the first year. For some people, and maybe this is you, you've had a brain injury for over 10 years. Wherever you're at, I want you to know that you are not alone. I always say that you are not alone and there's always hope are kind of like my two taglines, because when I first had my brain injury, I felt very alone and I felt very hopeless. I really struggled with not having support, not having community, not having resources. Our family really struggled on trying to find the right care for me. And that's partly what drives and motivates me to do this podcast, as well as to run the Hope After Head Injury support group. We meet once a month on Zoom. Would love for you to join us. And the Brain Injury Bible Study group, where we get to go deeper and talk about kind of the spiritual side of living with brain injury, which we also meet on Zoom there. And I'd love for you to join us there. But when I first had my brain injury, I just remember life was this gigantic, confusing bubble. I was very alone. I was very confused. I remember just feeling like I lost every aspect of who I was. I couldn't do the same things I did before. I couldn't interact with my friends in the same way. I didn't have the accomplishments and abilities to do schoolwork and sports and dance and all the things that I did before the injury. And I couldn't express myself because I couldn't ever think of the right words to say. So it was continual frustration. I would have emotional tantrums where I would fly off the handle without even realizing why. And I would be crying before I even realized I was sad. I would be yelling before I even realized I was angry. I would be, speaking words that didn't make sense, just being overwhelmed. My head hurt all the time. I literally had a constant headache for the first couple years that never let up. And my balance was so bad. I was falling all over the place and I didn't get the right treatments. So when I first went to our first neurologist, our first doctor that I saw after my first brain injury, which, like I mentioned, today's the anniversary. It was December 2nd, 2007. We found out much later that the CAT scan was blurry due to my movement, and he never got it reordered. Recently there's been doctors that thought maybe I had some sort of stroke or a mini stroke at the time of the injury because I presented like that. My whole right side atrophied, and I lost word finding difficulties. But they diagnosed me with mild concussion, said, go home and rest. We'll be fine. The doctor actually said, you'll be laughing about this in 6 weeks. Go home and rest and do nothing. So it was right before Christmas, December 2nd, and I went home and, I couldn't go back to school up until winter break. I was 14 and I rested and did nothing, and I got worse, not better. Now, what I want you guys to understand is I don't remember a lot of the first year. It's very I get some flashes now, but I really don't remember a lot of it. A lot of it is what I've been told by my mom, my family. For them, I think that it was a much bigger struggle at the beginning than for me because I was very unaware of my own deficits. I was in denial in a lot of ways. But once things started to fall into place, I think it's like a year or two after, I really, really struggled with identity. I really struggled with grief. I really struggled with losing hope. I felt like my whole personality changed. All of my ability to do anything was gone. I was depressed. I was overwhelmed all the time. And my brain felt like it was constantly on fire. Like my head was hurting constantly. And it was just this tornado of everything felt wrong. Everything felt off. And I did not feel like myself. So I'm here, right? It's been 17 years since that. And this is episode number 93 of Hope Survives podcast. I've been doing this podcast for 4 years. I can't believe we got to episode 93. I took some significantly long breaks in the last 4 years because I have had a lot of symptoms and struggles with my own brain injury in the last couple years. This is not a once and done injury for me. It has been a long journey. And my perspective on healing and hope has evolved and changed and grown over the years. I think when I was younger, I used to keep hoping and thinking that I would at first I was like, I'll just get better and my life will go back to how it was before, or some semblance of that. And then I flipped all the way to the other side because I had been told by a neurologist that, believe it or not, neuroplasticity was not real. That's kind of what he said to my mom. She was looking up all these studies and they were practicing very old school, not current research, right? And this was even back in 2007 and 2008. Basically, I was told that any brain damage was permanent and there was no possible way to improve. And I just kind of had to live with it and figure out how to manage my symptoms and just live with it. And so I kind of flipped to the opposite of, I'm just going to be disabled and I will never be able to do anything I want to do. And the rest of my life, I'm just never going to ever do anything. And I lost hope. And I felt like I lost myself. Now, the anchor for me through all of this was my faith. In those dark times, prayer was the only thing that kept me going. Trusting and believing that God had a plan for my life. I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional. Trusting and believing that God had a plan for my life, even when I did not see it or understand it. When I felt overwhelmed and the memory loss. I mean, I've really emotionally struggled with memory loss because I would forget people and conversations. And I felt like I was just like losing everything. And I couldn't even trust my own memory. Like, I couldn't trust anything about my experience. Everything felt weird and tainted. And I remember praying, asking the Lord to be my memory, to help me to remember what God wanted me to remember and to be able to let go of the unnecessary things. That if I was going to forget something, that it would be something that was unnecessary. I remember praying that. But yeah, I mean, looking back, it's the chronic side of this is that I've lived more of my life with a brain injury than without one. And I firmly believe that had I gotten the right treatment at the beginning of this process, after my first brain injury, if the research was where it is today, if we had the treatments that are available today, if I was able to get into the right therapies and learn about the nervous system, learn about the vestibular system, get my eyes checked, all these things that we know about now, I really believe that I would have improved and been able to have a very, very different life. Now, there's a fine line between realizing that and also not having regret or sadness over it. Things were the way that they were. We can't change the past, right? We can just start where we are and move forward. I think there's a C.S. Lewis quote or something that's like, you can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending. I don't know. Maybe that's not him. I don't remember. But you know, I have to learn how to have perspective on this journey. And a lot of my pain and struggles I have channeled into Hope Survives. I've channeled into Hope After Head Injury, into doing support groups. I didn't set out to like become a brain injury advocate or have a brain injury podcast or anything like that. I actually, in 2012, started a Twitter page and a Facebook page called Hope After Head Injury. And I just started posting stuff about brain injury because that's what my generation did. I'm a millennial. I'm a young millennial, but I'm a millennial nonetheless. And we grew up with social media, and that was a big part of our lives. And so we were online a lot. And I thought, well, maybe I should make a page about brain injury because there wasn't any. I couldn't find a single one. So I just made this page called Hope After Head Injury. Like some of the brain injury associations existed at the time, like, you know, and I had gotten involved with the Brain Injury Association support group, and I went to a place called Camp Cranium in 2010 with other kids with brain injuries. And that was the first time I was with other people who've had brain injuries, and it changed my life to connect with others. And so in 2012, I was like, I just want to make this page on Facebook and see if it reaches anyone. To my surprise, a lot of people started commenting and connecting in the early days on Twitter and I don't even run the Twitter anymore. But back then, you know, I started to connect and people started commenting saying, oh my gosh, me too. And at the time I didn't even put my name on it because I didn't want to be, I still had some shame, to be honest, around my brain injury, and it felt really vulnerable. And so I just made this anonymous page called Hope After Head Injury. And it took me 2 years to put my name on it. It wasn't until 2014 that which is 10 years ago now, which is crazy. I started the Hope After Head Injury Facebook support group, and I started posting videos. And I posted a video in the beginning of 2015 called "You Look Fine: The Struggle of an Invisible Injury." And it went like mini viral. And from there, people started asking me to come and speak at conferences. And I ended up keynoting like at the Mayo Clinic's brain injury conference and a bunch of statewide conferences. They would fly me out to speak at these events. And I was just like, why am I here? Like, I didn't go searching for any of this. It just kind of started, the Lord just started opening some doors, and I just started walking through them. And so eventually that turned into, I started doing weekly chats on Facebook in 2016. I started doing an online chat, I believe it's 2016. It had to have been, or 2017. Every Tuesday night at 7 p.m., I did a half-hour live video. And I did that for 7 straight years, every week on Facebook Live. And just talking about brain injury, and people started commenting, and we just created this community. And from there, the Zoom started. The Hope After Head Injury Zoom group was an outpouring of that Facebook live chat community. And then on the Zoom groups, people started to ask more questions about the Lord and wanted to talk about that. But I really wanted to keep our Hope After Head Injury Zoom support group a space where we were talking mostly about brain injury. And so an outpouring of that, an outgrowth of that, was the Brain Injury Bible Study group. Kind of organically grew out of the Hope After Head Injury group to give people space to talk about the Bible. I know it's, often hard to read or to connect with your faith after a brain injury. And so it gives people a chance to talk about that. So, and I started this podcast, Hope Survives podcast. I kind of skipped the part where I started writing music after my brain injury. Music was a big part of my healing journey. When I first had my injury, I was sharing like a lot of those symptoms that I struggled with. I really couldn't hold coherent conversations. I really couldn't explain my own emotions and feelings. I had word finding difficulties. I was overwhelmed, but for some reason, music made sense to me. And I started writing my first songs, and they were just little songs to express kind of how I was feeling in the moment, which eventually led to, they were very dark and very hopeless when I first started writing songs, but eventually I kept writing, and I got asked to sing at different places and share. And then people started to ask me for a CD, and I did my first recordings, and it's just been kind of a organic journey for me. And now I'm here, and I'm just like, wow. I look back, and through all of the speaking and advocacy and writing and recording music and starting these podcasts, like, my brain felt horrible. Like, my brain injury has been a serious issue for a long time. When I would start to feel a little bit better, I would fall and get another concussion. I've had over 12 diagnosed concussions since the first brain injury, and I've had more falls and flare ups that I don't even count in that count. I've also had COVID twice, like I mentioned in the intro, once in January 2022, and the last time just this year in June 2024. Today, I have brain injury symptoms that affect me. And it's just been a really long journey. It's hard when it's invisible. It's hard when you can't remember things. It's hard when you can't, just see why, and you can't see, you can't really see through the fog. So if you're there, I just want to encourage you today, like, you are not alone. But something I want to talk about is like anniversaries. So like I said, today is the 17-year anniversary of my brain injury, and I wasn't sure what I was going to do today. I've learned to keep it open because I never really know how I'm going to feel. The first number of years, the anniversary hit very hard for my family and for me. Some years I've been able to look and say, wow, I'm really grateful for how far I've come. And some years I've felt grateful and sad. And some years I felt mostly sad and a little grateful. And some years I felt mostly grateful and a little sad. This year, I feel like I'm a balance between the two. I have a lot of sadness for where my health is right now, especially since having COVID this year. And just it flared up all my underlying brain injury symptoms that I had before, and um, I wish I could do more every day. Like, I wish that I had more energy. I wish I could drive. I have my permit, but I don't have my license, and that's hard. It's hard on my family to have to drive me around all the time. I wish that, I didn't have all of this. I wish my family didn't have to go through it, but I am grateful. I don't believe that I would have the relationship with God that I have today had I not gone through the brain injury. I've lived more of my life with a brain injury than without. 17 years is a long time. Like, that's a whole almost adult teenager. That's a long time. That's the majority of my life. And it still sucks. But it's the only life I know, and it's the only life I've had. And there are a lot of beautiful aspects to the life that I have been able to live. So today I was just sitting here, and honestly, all morning I was in a funk. I was not taking care of myself well. And it's like sometimes I get in these self-sabotaging modes where it's like, I know I should be drinking water, but I don't feel like it. I know I should be eating something healthy, but I'd rather eat something not healthy. I know I should go on my walking pad and exercise, but I just want to sit here, and I think it's okay to have times like that, as long as it's not every day, right? Because every day of not eating well and not drinking well and not exercising would lead to more chronic problems. But there are days that it's okay. So I was like, I need to do something. So I got on my computer and I thought maybe I should do something towards the podcast. And my brain was swirling, and I thought maybe I should just record this episode. So I didn't really have a plan going into it. I just thought that I would just share from the heart. If you are going through your own brain injury anniversary, the first one is really hard. I don't know where you're at on your journey. I just want to encourage you to give yourself space on your anniversary. Best you can, try not to schedule anything. In past years, I've had to schedule things, and sometimes it's been good. On my 10-year anniversary, I think it was, I was booked to sing at an event. And that was actually beautiful because I was able to do something that brought me joy and encourage others through it. But some years, I just want to sit at home and let myself have space, spend time with the Lord or do whatever. And so I just want to encourage you, give yourself space. Don't push yourself too hard. The anniversary and the anniversary week can be hard. I never really know how I'm going to react. So, yeah. But anyway, just to share a little bit more of my journey, I don't often do this on this podcast. I think maybe I should do more episodes where I talk about my story, because I feel like I share little bits in the other episodes where I interview people. Like, I'll share anecdotes or parts of my journey, but to really talk more deeply about my own story, it's not the space to do that when I'm interviewing someone else. Like, I want to hear their story. I want to give them space. I don't want to be like talking about myself the whole time, right? That would not make me a good interviewer. But yeah, today this just felt like the right thing to do because I was feeling kind of raw and vulnerable. So where should I go from here? If there's anything I want you guys to know, it's that there's hope. Like, I've shared some of the struggles today because that's kind of what I was thinking about, but also I've met so many beautiful people in the brain injury community. I have found a resilience I didn't know that I had. I've learned how to depend on God in a deeper level than I ever thought. I started writing songs. I never wrote a song before the brain injury. And now I have multiple albums and I've toured. I sometimes I forget that I toured so much before the pandemic because that's just not part of my life right now. I still do concerts, but it's not like it used to be. And I'm just really grateful that even through the brain injury, I've still been able to have opportunities. I mean, that's God's grace, right? But it doesn't mean it's been easy. And it's learning your limits, learning kind of where your brain needs time to rest, and also learning where you can make those risks of stepping forward. So I guess that kind of leads me to towards the end of this. I don't know what else to ask myself. I guess I could share a little bit more about my symptoms. I feel like we talk about symptoms a lot on this podcast, though. Um, I'm losing my trains of thought, and I don't want this podcast to be boring for you guys. So I think I'm going to start to wrap it up. I did want to share, I'm not ready to make a full announcement yet, but for those of you still listening, you're getting a little preview. We are in the early stages of forming a nonprofit organization called Hope Survives. And I am going to be going into doing that pretty much full time starting in 2025. At this stage in my life, at this stage in my career, if you want to call it that, it feels like it's time because I've been doing all this brain injury support and advocacy for just out of something it felt like the right thing to do. I pay out of my own pocket for the Zoom subscription and for the website subscription. I don't run ads on these podcasts. I pay for everything myself. It's something that I have done as a passion project to help other people with brain injuries. I've never made money through this. I don't want anyone to think that. There's nothing in it for me. But at this stage in my life, as I've been praying, I've spent the last 5 years kind of thinking, I would like to start my own nonprofit someday, but I am not a business person. I don't know how to do that. The last 2 years, I've been praying very seriously about it. And this year has been very life-changing. Some of you guys know I got married in this beginning of this summer. Been a big adjustment, and I'm in a new stage in life. And every time I pray about it, I feel like it's time to put the paperwork behind what I'm already doing and to be able to expand it further. We have an amazing team. I have a powerhouse group of women helping to run this nonprofit. We have a board of directors. We already had our first meeting. And we're going to have a better announcement next year. But this is kind of the soft launch, I suppose you would say. Hopefully we will be able to run some sort of fundraiser over the holidays this year, but I'm just really excited about new programs, more support groups, more events, being able to provide very tangible hope for all of you, because living with brain injury is hard. It's not easy. And when I look back at 17 years of chronic disability and struggles and at ups and downs, but I think if I can use any of this to help someone, then it's worth it. And if I can use any of this to be compassionate listening ear for someone else going through this, then it's worth it. I just want to follow the Lord wherever he'll lead. And I know we're all on borrowed time anyway. I mean, life is a gift. Each moment is a gift. We don't deserve the grace that we have each and every day and each and every moment. Like, there's so many blessings and gifts that we have. And the love of God is just so beautiful and tangible. The word said a steadfast love endures forever. And I lean on that. And I believe that with all my heart. And that's the love I want to share with others. And so, we're starting the process of creating this nonprofit. And I'm excited. If you've been at the Zoom groups, I've been sharing a little bit on there, but I want to ask you all to partner as we step forward. And I can't wait to be able to provide more tangible help, hope, resources, encouragement programs, workshops, support groups, because we need each other. I mean, we need community. You need to know that you're not alone in a very real way. And whatever you're going through, I hope that this episode has been able to encourage you. I am not at my cognitive best today. I will tell you that. But I hope that my vulnerability in sitting in front of a microphone for a half hour was somehow able to bring some encouragement to you today. So I always ask the guests, what's your final words of hope? So I'll ask that to myself. Cristabelle, what are your final words of hope for our listeners today? And I just want to say, don't give up on your journey. Keep turning over stones. Keep seeking out new treatments. Don't let this be the end of your journey today. You do not have to stay where you are today. You can step forward, whether it's in your physical rehab, whether it's in your emotional state, whether it's learning how with your nervous system, right? Like we had that interview with Shelly a couple weeks ago on nervous system safety, being able to take tangible steps every day to calm your nervous system and really live that lifestyle. I've been trying so hard to give myself more space in my life, to give more margin, to be able to allow myself to feel, to be able to allow myself to breathe deeply, to be able to give myself the space and time to process. I used to push myself somewhat out of, I don't want to say punishing myself, but I think that is a little part of it. I had very, very negative self-talk in my mind, and I used to push myself so hard because with a brain injury, I felt like I was useless in so many areas. If there was anything I could do, I felt like if I can do it, then I should do it. And I would push myself and I would burn out, and it was not sustainable. That's when I was touring, doing so many concerts, doing so many things. I've actually said no to a number of things this year. I've learned how to say no, which is hard with a brain injury because when you can't do anything, it's so hard to say no to things that you love and want to do. I mean, I was invited to speak at brain injury conferences this year. I said no to a couple of them because they didn't work in my schedule and in my time. And if it did work, it would have been pushing myself way too hard. So I'm learning how to give myself more rest and balance, and learning how to also giving my heart and my mind space to process and balance. I think that, there is something to be said for giving not just giving yourself physical time to rest, but giving yourself mental time to rest, taking time off of social media, taking time off of the phones. The word of God talks about Sabbath, and I've been thinking about that more. And my husband and I have been trying to implement a Sabbath practice each weekend, where we don't go on our phones and we don't check our emails, and we spend a day where we just spend time with the Lord and with each other, and things that bring us life, and I'm learning how to give myself more margin, more space, and take more deep breaths in life. So if there's any encouragement to you is give yourself grace, give yourself space. You do not have to do it all today. What is for you will be for you in the right time. And you don't have to push yourself to make it happen. So God will lead you every step of the way. I didn't seek out to be a musician, to be an artist. I didn't seek out to do any of this brain injury stuff. I just kind of started little by little. And it's been a journey. But you're not alone. And if any of you have questions for me, I feel like if I do this episode, maybe I should start like a Q&A series. I'll put something out maybe for questions for next time I want to do this, because I would love to be able to answer your guys' questions about my journey. It's hard for me to just like come up with things on my own without like question prompts. But I was recently interviewed by Bethany at the Concussion Coach for her podcast. I don't think she's released it yet, but I really enjoyed that conversation because she interviewed me and I was able to share more of my story. And I'm like, I don't think I've even shared some of that on my own podcast. So I'll definitely share the link out for that when she puts that up on her podcast. But words of hope. There's always hope. Don't give up, and connect with others that love you, that support you, that understand. Yeah. So thank you so much for being here today on Hope Survives podcast. And I hope to see you next week at our next episode. Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Hope Survives podcast. Make sure to subscribe and stay tuned, and would love for you to consider leaving us a rating or a review. Check out hopeafterheadinjury.com for more. I'll see you next time. And remember, there's always hope.